So, you know, and we're not doing very well on quite a few of our chronic, quite a bit of our chronic disease management. So there were some changes. There were some changes around integration. There was a bit of strengthening of some of the governance because there was a bit of a feeling that no one was going to hold these CCGs to account for anything. They morphed from being GP commissioning groups, by the way, into clinical commissioning groups because every time in the NHS, anytime you give something to one profession, everyone pops up and says, yes, but what about podiatrists or what about physiotherapists? Or, and you have to sort of be inclusive. So the GPs got turned into clinical commissioning groups. So new commissioning framework. Quite a lot of the money flowing through CCGs, but actually quite a bit coming from the commissioning board. Health and Wellbeing Board's significance here is it does a needs assessment. It writes with the CCGs a joint health and wellbeing, a local health and wellbeing strategy. They don't sign off the CCG plans, but the CCGs are supposed to actively participate that and commission in line with that strategy. So we potentially have a better way of building in public health and other things. Is that me? Probably. I think it is. Beg your pardon. Okay. So the funds flow not that different from what we've been used to, apart from this National Commissioning Board's big say in primary care. Just sort of a bit of architecture for you. There is a rule in NHS reorganisation I've observed that you are not allowed any number of organisations as has previously existed. So we've got 27 local area teams of the National Commissioning Board. There were 28 strategic health authorities. I thought for one, there was a point where we were going to have 28 and my rule would have been violated, which would have been very bad. So these will be overseeing primary care. I think that they may well get involved in some strategic planning, despite the previous Secretary of State's plans. There'll be 4 regional offices. So although we were trying to get rid of bureaucracy, there are actually now more layers of it than there were before. Therefore, thereby creating a political stick with which you can beat the government and therefore creating the impetus for the next reform. I'm being very cynical, but I fear that is a possibility. There's then these clinical senates, of which there are 12. We've not had 12 of anything before either, which is great. And they're giving advice to CCGs. They're providing some specialist input. I think they're potentially quite an interesting bunch of people because I think one of the good things about this reform is it does put more people who actually know about the detailed business of healthcare in charge of making decisions about it, which is, you know, is quite a positive step and does bring the clinicians much more centrally into some of the decision-making process, which previously they've sort of been able to leave to other people. And again, that was part of the intention of the reform. So there were 12 of these. And then we got these commissioning support services. So CCGs have got significantly less pounds per head than a primary care trust. So they've been given a £25 limit. No one's very sure exactly what a PCT had, and it was confused by the fact that public health money was in there. But it looks like about a third less than what they had before. So it's quite a significant drop. And these people will do contract negotiation, big database management. They'll help with planning. The attitude, as you go round, you'll find massively different attitudes of the CCGs to these people. And there are some of these places where, frankly, you know, I think they've got a guaranteed place in the world until 2016. David Nicholson very cleverly agreed a date which was past the next election, at which point everyone would have forgotten that the idea was that these were supposed to be a competitive market. And a lot of what these people do is very much in a capita circo, you know, sort of back office and middle office facilities, you know, back management companies that we've seen a lot of in local government. But at the moment, they've got a monopoly, and some of the GPs absolutely hate that and will be looking to try and do it themselves or buy it from other people. It'll be interesting to see how they may well, in some places, acquire, because there is a tendency for power to accrete to organisations, quite a bit of influence. But at the moment, it's hard to know. So, will it achieve its objectives? So one of the objectives was the end of central control. I think we're very far out of the woods from this. It looks to me like there's still a lot of levers. They're not quite the same as the old ones. There isn't the patronage where you can sack the chief executive, but there's certainly quite a lot of influence and a lot of money. There's these things called academic health science networks, which are not technically part of these reforms. Do people know about these? Okay. So if you're the hub of an academic health science network, in other words, an academic health science centre, about probably 40% of your money comes directly from the National Commissioning Board. It's the single biggest purchaser. Right? So you might be inclined to listen to it when it says things to you. So you're then at the hub of a whole big network over which you have significant influence over how it operates and where things are. So there's some other levers. The National Commissioning Board also controls all leadership development for providers. Unique in the world that a payer is controlling leadership development. Why would it do that? Because it's a form of influence. So I think we may not have seen the end of this. The difference, of course, is two big differences here is there's first of all the CCG's relationship to the National Commissioning Board is not quite the same linear direct management, I control your career relationship that would be the case in PCTs. And secondly, the Health and Wellbeing Board strategy gives you perhaps an interestingly alternative source of legitimacy, and it's not such a straightforward dynamic. It still looks to me quite a powerful power direction in that direction too. So what about a new approach to commissioning? The UK's approach to commissioning in healthcare has been a bit unusual compared with other European countries. You find a lot of direct commissioning of inputs often to an extraordinary level of detail. I mean, down to, in some cases, I found, literally how many nurses on a shift, and not quite what colour hat they should wear, but into a level of detail that seemed really inappropriate. Whereas, actually, in other parts of the world, and I see quite a few of the GPs thinking like this, that actually want to start commissioning a set of outcomes, which means you need providers bundling their activities together so that when you look at a year of care for diabetic care, you don't have to have an argument with this provider on eye care and that provider on foot care and this provider on their renal function, or whether they're on a statin or what their blood pressure control is. I was saying to Andy, imagine building a house with the yellow pages, not knowing much about building, and then holding people to account for that when it falls down. It's not going to happen. So you need the providers to be bundled. To at least, so we'll see more lead contractors. We'll see a lot of interest in alliance-type contracting models where commissioners can be more attuned to outcomes. And frankly, if you've only got £25 a head, outcomes may be all you can do. Will it create a... So we may get a new approach to commissioning. And actually, it's interesting. I don't know what your impression is, but my impression is the GPs are... they're a bit in the micro side of things, but they're often asking better questions very often. So I'm moderately hopeful about that. Will it be more locally accountable? Hard to know. This is one of the ones hard to know. There's a lot of accountability machinery, but anyone can really be held to account in a hard way. That means if you fail, you move on. I don't know. Not so clear. Possibly. It's not a great time to be entering this market, actually. There's not a lot of spare money. As Paul Corrigan, who used to work for Tony Blair, says, if there's one thing GPs like less than big government, it's big business. So who knows? There's been a lot of social enterprises. They're likely to struggle against the Virgins and Sercos of this world. They don't have the infrastructure. I think we'll see this on the community services side. I doubt we'll see it in general practice for a while because of who holds the budget, but who knows? Less so in hospitals. I'm going to just a little statistic here, which is quite interesting. Quite a lot of the old people are returning up again, which is interesting and may affect things. We've now got 212. We only had 150 PCTs, so they're not exactly that different in many ways. I've been doing some mock panels of CCGs. I'd be interested in your reflections on this. They're very variable in terms of their ability. There's some really brilliant people in these things. Very impressive. Are there enough of them? That's a good question. We don't know. Is there enough to make a tipping point? Will they get discouraged and go home? Because actually, You know, whereas if a PCT chief executive's got nowhere else to go if they get, you know, if it doesn't work, GP's got another job. They can go back somewhere else. So, you know, will they stay when the going gets tough? I think many of them will. Scale's an issue for some of them. They're just not big enough to talk to. The providers are getting more and more networked and merging and getting bigger and bigger. We've seen this in the US. Payers across the world are getting bigger, except in the UK, where we decided, or England rather, where we decided that we'll have lots. We work on the basis that if Europe is doing it, it must be wrong. But Europe is consolidating its payers. The US has too. We've got lots of little ones, and there's a good reason for that, which is about scale. They tend to be not great on strategy. It may be early days. It may be because actually, if you've just spent the last 20 years of your life running a small business, which largely consists of a workflow which is programmed 2 to 3 days ahead, strategy isn't necessarily one of your core skills. But that's okay, because it's not been the core skill of anyone else in the NHS. So, you know, it's not going to be that hard to catch up. There's an interesting, hospitals across the world treat next week as strategic and the week after as the unimaginable future. So it's something about the nature of healthcare breeds a sort of short-termism and a tendency to fix the immediate thing in front of you rather than think longer term. You see better stuff in mental health, actually. It's into slower moving, more difficult to manage, you know, longer term things that you actually see more strategy going on. Some interesting stuff happening in mental health. They're talking to housing associations, they're looking at prisons, they're interested in social care, but the rest of us are a bit stuck in the let's get on with now. To talk to Imperial, you've got to federate. So they have in North West London. Making federal arrangements work is very hard because you've got to make them stick. I sit round and we all have a lovely time and we all agree, and they're very relationship-based, these things. What happens if I go home and don't do what I said? How do you call it out? It's hard. These are your colleagues. You've got no formal way of getting them to do that. So the federal working is great because it will allow you to talk to Imperial, but keeping it enforced, particularly if one person's winning and another person's losing, you know, is really. We've had lots of experience of this with multi-partnership type arrangements. They're hard to make stick. The politics are going to be a challenge. So I spoke to a GP, very really good leader of a CCG. Said, we asked him what he was going to do about communicating with the public that his CCG was part of a plan to close 2 A&E departments and downgrade 3 hospitals. I said, well, I don't know why. I said, I don't think they want to talk to me about that, will they? I thought, well, do you know, I think they might. Because meanwhile, number 10 is ringing the boss of your Strategic Health Authority, and if she's not there, it's going to be you. And that's going to feel quite exposed and quite rough. All of a sudden, you know, you're in front of 400 people who are baying for blood, and you're getting phone calls from number 10. That would be a challenge. I expect they'll manage, but it's going to be tough. You know, and for you, who do you talk to? Who do you talk to? Who's writing the formulary? Who's making decisions on? You know, very hard, and actually can't talk to any of them at the moment because they're all being authorised. I don't know if you've experienced this. It's hard to talk to anyone. Okay, so I can't answer that question for you. Sorry. So some big risks. We're busy restructuring, and the operation. I don't need to draw you a picture about the finances. You all know about the state of the NHS's finances. I mean, I don't know, Andrew. I'd love to come to listen to Andrew. He and I have been doing some work together. I don't know what you think, Andrew. My guess would be within 2 to 3 years, the health and social care budgets will have been just pushed together, and health will be bailing out the unresolved issues around DIL-NOT and long-term care of older people. So we have a real terms increase. Real terms. Real terms actually means the GDP deflator, which actually is less than inflation, by the way. So it's real in the terms of the way the government thinks, not in real in the sense of real world. So that's issue 1. Issue 2, that's only guaranteed to the next election. Issue 3, there's a big hole in local government social care. So I was in Manchester the other day. The authorities there reckon that within 5 years, all they will be doing will be social care. No bins, no road repair, no transport, no library. This isn't going to happen. People don't vote for local government because of their social care provision. Because most of the people don't know they're doing it, and many of the recipients are, a small number of people receive it. So it's not a big electoral winner, right? So how do you deal with that? And I think you deal with it by taking money out of the NHS. That would be my guess. Andrew, would you? Yeah. I'm glad you agree with that, because there was a slight moment of tension there. But actually, I feel pretty confident about that. So I think there's a big pressure coming. Here's an interesting thing that's emerging. Everyone's primary care is the one bit that's not being reformed. And if you're a commissioner and you want to change, so you want to try and reduce A&E attendances, you can't do that through commissioning because the hospital isn't going out and recruiting emergency patients. They're going there because your colleagues are not caring for them. So you have to change primary care. So, and I think that consensus is emerging. So we start to, also, there's been no uplift in the GMS contract for 4 years. So I think we're going to see an outbreak of federal arrangements of people getting together and big practices. And once you've got a big practice, actually, I can now wrap community services around it. I can get a geriatrician, I can get a dermatologist once a fortnight, get a psychiatrist once a fortnight, get a respiratory physician coming in. I can start to build a multi-specialty group practice from the bottom up. You can give me diagnostics, D-dimer, ultrasound, plain film. If I'm big enough, I can do all sorts of things. I can start doing IV antibiotics, subcut fluids, start looking at the nursing homes, and more nursing home residential beds than there are NHS beds. All of a sudden, I've got quite a powerful engine to reshape my healthcare system through primary care as a provider. And now I also happen to be a commissioner. That's quite handy. If I can persuade the NCB to be flexible about my contract, there's things I could do. And then my final, the sort of final 2 points here about there's a huge development challenge which you'll not escaped you, and this question about who does strategic planning. Don't know the answer to that. We don't know. We've no idea. You know about this? This frames your conversation. I don't need to run through. We're a bit. I don't know about you. I'm a bit vague on what some of this really means at the moment. But that's okay, so is everyone else. So I feel reasonably... I think this is quite good. This is quite a good set of mechanisms. And you're familiar with the various bits that drive this around the commissioning outcomes framework, the guidance that will go with this, the tariffs that support it. Interestingly, you know, across the world, I was talking before we started, people are starting to realise that tariff plus a bit of pay for performance is not a great method for paying for chronic disease. So I think we might start to see some real innovation around payment mechanisms. I certainly hope so, because they need to change. A few other little details. There will be a reward, which we don't understand, a quality premium paid to practices, but no details really as yet. We talked about nice guidance being informed, and I've spoken about that. Okay. So basically, it's all terribly risky. No one quite knows what's happening. There are some very interesting opportunities, and some of these things are really disruptive and could create health and wellbeing boards, academic health science networks, greater clinical engagement. Some of the bureaucracy's gone, although it may come back. There are some really interesting things that could happen if people get a bit of space to be innovative and do something differently. Thank you very much.